Monster Castle Radio Show. For the extreme paranormal listener. And here is your host, the Wolfman, Mike.
This is where the real freaks hang out, alright, yeah.
It's 8, Wolfman.
We're on live, man. It's Wolfman Mike. Welcome. This is Monster Castle Paranormal Radio. And I'm here with my co-host, Darren. How you doing, buddy?
Here I am. I'm doing wonderful. I'm excited about our guest tonight.
Yeah, man. We got Michael Cremo, the Vedic Creationist. Everybody has heard of Michael. He's the cutting edge of science, and he is on the cutting edge of science and culture issues. In the course of a few months' time, he might be found on a pilgrimage to sacred sites in India. Oh yes. He's been on national television shows. He's lectured mainstream science conferences, speaking on alternative science, gathering a whole new consensus on the nature of reality. Michael Cremo is a member of the World Archaeological Congress and the European Association of Archaeologists, as well as an associate member of, I can't pronounce this one.
Bhaktivedanta.
I was waiting for that. How you doing, Michael?
Yeah, that's right.
I was waiting for you to jump in. I was like, is he going to jump in? Yeah, he did. Specialized in history and philosophy.
That was my cue. That was my cue.
Yeah, that was your cue.
The
pause was your cue. That was it.
All right.
Is he coming? Is he on the...
Yeah, man. That was great. Michael.
So, this is Michael Cremo.
Michael Cremo, everyone, man. This is amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
A big hand of
Thank
applause.
you for coming on.
I'm here.
Where did you... Let's see, you're what, 71 now?
That's right.
You were born right after World War II. Where did you grow up?
I was born in a place called Schenectady, New York, and I didn't live there for very long. My father had been in the Air Force, Army Air Force during World War II, and then after the war he got out for a couple years and then started a family in Schenectady, New York, which was his hometown, and that's where I was born. And then a couple of years later, he went back into the Air Force during the Korean War. And then we kind of, after, he got back from Korea, the family started moving, as Air Force families do, from base to base, around the world, and Hawaii, Florida, Texas, Germany, places like that. So I kind of grew up moving around, quite a bit. I went to high school in Germany, in Wiesbaden, Germany, at a American military school there. And during my vacations, I would go different places in Europe. During one spring vacation from high school, I went with a friend of mine to we went hitchhiking from Germany up to Stockholm, Sweden, and I was staying in a youth hostel there, and I met these kids that had come overland from India. They'd gone from Europe to India and back overland. It's very difficult to do that these days, because things are such a mess in the Middle East. But you know, and they were telling me about all kinds of experiences they had in India, meeting different yogis and mystics, and going to the Himalayan mountains and to Nepal and places like that, Kashmir. And I decided, one day I'd like to do that. So when I was a few years older, I did wind up going that route myself. You could still do it at the time, going across Turkey and Iran and Afghanistan. A little different than it is now,
So did you go on foot? How'd you get
Well,
there?
you had to walk from the hotel to the train station. So I guess you could say part of it was on foot. But yeah, no, I mean, there was a whole route. You would go from Turkey, from Istanbul, on a freighter, along the Black Sea coast of Turkey to Trabzon. And then you get off at Trabzon, you take a train to the border between Turkey and Iran, and then you get on a train that would take you across the border from Turkey to Tabriz in Iran, and then from Tabriz you catch another train or a bus, but I took a train from Tabriz. I was about 19.
Were you by yourself?
There were other people doing it. It was kind of like a route, like the hippie route. So you would meet. You would hook up with different people along the way. Maybe you'd meet somebody who would go from Istanbul to Trabzon with you, and then you'd part ways and then go with other people. There was always somebody going along the route with you. It was kind of a route. You stay in certain hotels, go to certain restaurants. Because what I had done is when I met those kids at the youth hostel in Stockholm when I was 16, I kind of wrote it down, the route. I asked them, well, how did you get from here to there to there to there? And all right, so I wrote it all down, and I more or less followed the same route.
What did they specifically tell you about their experiences that made you have to go there at 19 years old by yourself?
At that time, I have to say, I wasn't. I've done a lot of things since then. I've kind of gone on a different, more spiritual path. But at that time, I was still, I guess, marijuana mama would understand this. I was still relying on some of the substances to aid me in my quest, you could say.
Oh, wow.
So, you hear about...
What type of hallucinogenics did you use, sir?
Well, in that part of the world, there was something called hashish.
Yes. Is that just this resin made from marijuana?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, that's nothing much,
really. So on your way to India, you went through Iran and Iraq. What was it like? What were those countries like at that time? So let's see, that would have been right around 1969?
Yeah. I found them, they were very peaceful at the time, and they were, of course, for the most part, Islamic. But the Islamic people that I met at the time, they had, it was part of their tradition to welcome travelers. Say I was going through northern Afghanistan at the time. It was a kingdom at the time, and in each little town they would have a royal guest house. Not like a big palace, pretty simple place. But if any traveler was coming into town, they would just take them to the royal guest house, and you could stay there for the night and go on. It was, I mean, it's something that would be very hard to imagine when you're thinking about what's going on in those places these days. So
you made it to India.
No, actually, I didn't make it to India that time. I wanted to go there. See, the difficulty for me was when I got to Afghanistan, it was in the middle of winter, and I got sick, and I got as far as Kabul, and basically all I would have had to do was take another bus, and you go over the Khyber Pass to Peshawar, which is in Pakistan, and then from Peshawar you go down to Lahore, and then from Lahore you could get a train going into India. So I would have just had to make this final step. But I think it was actually pretty good for me that I didn't go to India at that time, because I think I would have just become not so much taking advantage of the spiritual opportunities the place offers. I would have gotten more sucked into the bong or ganja, marijuana, hashish, hallucinogenic side of it. So I'm actually kind of, in one sense, happy that, maybe that was just the arrangement at the time. That was my karma or whatever, that I wanted to go, but I was kind of blocked from going, in a psychic way. I can just say, from the material, objective point of view, what happened was I got to Kabul in the middle of winter, and I got, sick with some kind of flu or pneumonia or something. And, I just couldn't summon up enough energy to take, final step. I kind of felt kind of blocked, psychically, that, some barrier had been put up that wasn't going to let me get through at that time. So later, I came back, but by that time I was on a more spiritual path. I was able to take up the spiritual side of things and really benefit from it. And this is ultimately, because you were talking about the Grateful Dead. So what happened is, from Kabul I went back to the States, and I went home to Schenectady, and then I heard a cousin of mine and I were running a billiards lounge in Saratoga County, and I kind of heard that the Grateful Dead were coming to, I think, Rochester or Syracuse or something, And I had this idea
Yeah.
I wanted to start promoting rock concerts in addition to running the billiards lounge, the Half Moon Billiards Lounge in Half Moon, New York, in Saratoga County. And, I thought, okay. So I talked to my uncle who had helped set me up in the billiards lounge business. And he said, okay, I know this guy in town. He owns a theater, and I know a lawyer who could help you. So I went to talk. I went to the Grateful Dead concert because I wanted to get backstage and talk to them and their manager about doing a concert in my town. So that did happen.
How
I
big?
did meet the manager of the Grateful Dead. And what's that? You had a question?
What year was this? Were they a huge band at the time, or just like a small band, like in early
Well, I mean, this would have been early 70s, maybe 72 or 73. I think you can look up, they keep lists of all the Grateful Dead concerts they ever did. And you can kind of find
70s?
upstate New York, and maybe it was 73, something around there.
They probably have a recording of that concert.
Yeah, probably. And see, what had happened was there was a group of Hare Krishna devotees that were traveling with them. And, I met one of them. I didn't know they were Hare Krishnas. I met this girl. And, she was standing around in front of the stage, and she was passing out these white balls, sweet, some kind of candy. And she said, these are from backstage from the Grateful Dead. And would you like one? I said, sure, and I took it. I kind of thought, it's got to have LSD in it. So, and then I said, well, you know the Dead? And she said, yeah. And you know their manager? Yeah. I said, well, I'd like to talk to them. Can you take me backstage? She said, sure. So she took me backstage, introduced me to this guy, Scully, the manager, and some of the, Jerry Garcia was there, and we kind of were talking. Like I run this billiards lounge in Saratoga County, New York, and I want to promote a concert for you in my town. Would you like to do that? And the guy said, okay, sure, we'll talk about it. And and so I kind of left at that time. And then I saw the same girl and these two guys standing with her, and they saw me come out, and they asked me if I could give a donation for Bangladesh. And I'd seen this George Harrison concert or whatever, so I said, sure. And I gave them $100. And then,
that was nice. At the time, it would be a lot of money.
Yeah, it was.
Well, because I had thought maybe I have to bribe somebody to get backstage and talk to. So I thought, okay, I was going to give it to somebody anyways. I'll give it to these people, and so I just kind of dropped it in their bucket. And then I went and sat down and waited for the concert to start. And the three of them, they came up to me and they said, did you give this? They had the 100. Did you give this? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, we got a present for you. So they gave me a copy of Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the classic Indian text, and it had some nice illustrations in it, some very beautiful paintings.
Was it written in English?
In English, but it had the Sanskrit in it also. You know, the original Sanskrit text plus English. So
you could sort of cool.
I was looking at one of the paintings, and it showed this really trippy kind of picture of this person on a stairway, and part of the stairway was going up, and another part of the stairway was going down, and on the down part there were all these demoniac-looking persons pulling him down, and then at the top of the stairs there were these more saintly, glowing, divine kinds of beings beckoning him up. And I thought, yeah, that's how I feel a lot of the time. And yeah, so I was happy to get the book. And the girl, she had more of these round white candies, and she said you could have as many of these as you like. And I still thought I still thought they were, you know, loaded with psychedelics. So I took about 6 of them.
Oh my God!
And I thought I'm really going to be tripping. So you know, I kind of took the book home. I took the book home. And I read it. I didn't know anything about their whole movement and temples, but I thought it was an interesting book. I was always interested in Indian philosophy and meditation and yoga and reincarnation. So I kind of got into it a little bit. And
what about the candies? Did you take them right then, or did you take them home?
I took them all 6 right then and there.
What happened? Did you trip out or what?
Well, stay high forever, they say, right?
Oh, that's awesome, man.
That was the beginning of the rest of your life?
Well, yeah, you could say. Because eventually, after some time, I became a disciple of the guru who had translated the Bhagavad Gita from Sanskrit into English. You know, I became his disciple, and then from there, I kind of got into studying the rest of the Sanskrit literature, like the Puranas, which are the historical and cosmological writings of ancient India, and what happened then is that I began to wonder, well, because these writings were telling of human civilizations that existed millions of years ago on this planet and on other planets all over the universe. So I was thinking, that's really different than anything I heard from my high school teachers or college teachers about history. Is this just some kind of mythology? Or is there some factual basis for it? So I kind of started looking into the history of archaeology. You know, if you look at the current textbooks, you won't find any evidence that humans existed millions of years ago. You just find the evidence that goes along with the current theories that humans like us first came into existence a couple 100,000 years ago maximum. Before that, no humans, apes, monkeys, things like that. And then
I did not do that.
I decided, okay, I'm going to look beyond the textbooks. I'm going to dig into the whole history of archaeology. And when I did that, I found hundreds of reports of archaeologists finding human bones, human artifacts, human footprints, millions of years old. So then, go ahead.
So were you going to college then? So were you going to college for archaeology, or you just
no?
It just sparked your interest, and you just started reading about it, or?
Yeah, that's what happened. I went to college. I went to the George Washington University School of International Affairs because my father was an intelligence officer in the Air Force. And when I was in Germany, I told you I went to high school when I was living on a air base in Germany in the 1960s. That's when I was going to high school. And the people I lived among, like I said, my father was an intelligence officer. I had friends, their fathers were in the CIA and Army counterintelligence. And that's kind of the world I grew up in. So when people would ask me, what are you going to do when you go to college? What are you going to do when you grow up? I said, well, I'm going to be in one of the intelligence services. So I went to the George Washington University School of International Affairs, which is one of the top schools to train people who go in to the intelligence services. And I studied Russian, I studied German. Today they'd be studying Arabic or Chinese or something like that. But I was kind of into that, international politics and Russian and German and all. I was going to go into the State Department or the CIA or military intelligence, something like that. That was my original career goal, you could say. So
what was the first?
I kind of got off the track after a couple of years.
What was the first thing you found that put you on the new track?
Well,
Michael,
I kind of got into. I mean, one thing is, I would meet, like there would be. I was going to school at George Washington University, so at that time, that's like 1966, 67, 68. The Vietnam War was going on at that time. So at first, coming as I did from a military family, I was very much influenced by the point of view, the pro-war kind of view that was coming from the military and the government. I had a lot of faith in the military and the government at that time. But then what happened, one thing that happened to me was there were guys that were getting out of the Army and the other services who became students on the GI Bill at George Washington University. So I'd be in a class and I'd be talking to somebody who was sitting next to me and say, "Where do you come from?" I said, "Well, I came from the Army." I said, "What?" "Yeah, I spent 2 years in Vietnam." And I said, "Well, what was that like?" And I got this firsthand testimony from people that had been over there, like what was actually going on, the things that were going on, what was, and it was a completely different picture than you were getting from the mainstream media. It was, they told them that, things would get, people get mad, they'd shoot some villagers, they'd sometimes the troops were revolting against their own officers. They called them fragging and stuff like this. And I was just amazed, to get this kind of testimony coming from people. And then...
And you were in college, right?
Yeah, I was in college. And yeah.
So you didn't have to go to Vietnam?
And I didn't at that time, because if you were in college, you had an exemption.
Yeah.
You didn't.
I would stay in college as long as I could.
Right. But these guys,
what you did.
These guys had gone through, an enlistment, and they'd gotten out, and then they'd gone to college. And then I'd hear from them, these and then there was also, the counterculture, and you know, yeah, I got involved in a lot of things, and it kind of added up after a couple years that I wasn't so interested. I wasn't so interested in a career in the government or the military at that time.
Were you a hip?
Well, yeah,
Were you?
kind of, you could say.
Far out, man. I was like a hippie too, man. I like tie-dye and everything, man. It's far out, man.
I wasn't exactly like a real tie-dyed woolen, but I was kind of influenced.
Did you
by
like the Hair
counterculture.
soundtrack?
I didn't listen to that stuff. I listened to, let's see, what was it? Velvet Underground.
Oh, yeah. Lou Reed.
The Fugs. There was another whole thing going on besides the Hair soundtrack.
Wicked. Oh, you know what? That actually is a reminder that it is a half hour in. If you wanted to have a musical break, I got it lined up. I got that song lined up for you.
Okay, let's have a musical break.
We might as well. We've got Michael picked this out. It's Ninth Moon Black from India.
No, they're kind of an indie band, kind of a neo psychedelic sort of sound.
Okay, so you were involved a bit with this band, and they took some.
No,
of
they got in touch with me.
Oh,
They got in touch with me. They said, we heard you on Coast to Coast or one of these shows. I do these interviews, and they said, can we sample your voice to use on some of our tracks? So I said, sure.
Right on. So I hope it's in this one. This is the one I think it's on. Anyways, this is.
Well, we'll see if it's there. If you got it off their album, it's probably there somewhere. I think it's an EP album called Call You with 4 tracks on it. And I think they sampled my voice on all the tracks. It's got 4 tracks. It's been a while since I listened to it, so I can't tell you exactly what minute and second the sampling is on, but hopefully it'll come up.
All right, let's take the break.
Yeah.
He's in college. It's 1970.
Forbidden archaeologist himself. Oh yeah, you're pretty much the badass of archaeology. The original badass. Really? I like that. Is that okay if I say that?
Absolutely.
I wanted to say that because you are. Like, that's what I thought. Like, that guy, he's the coolest archaeologist when I first heard about you. And I've been following this kind of stuff for a long time, so I can't remember when. But as long as I can remember, you've been the coolest. To stand at your own ground and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not what the research is showing, and that's not what the evidence is showing here. You know?
Well, it certainly doesn't show it to me, but that's, you know, like, but I found, you know, people are interested in these kinds of subjects. You know, like things that are a little bit different than the ordinary things they hear from their teachers in high school or university. It's like, you know, people want to hear about it, and not just kind of all the kind of off the wall people who are my personal friends, but, you know, even a lot of the archaeologists and scientists, their ears kind of perk up a little bit. And therefore, you know, I've been able to speak at a lot of universities and scientific conferences and stuff like that. But and my books get translated. Go ahead.
Let's go back. Let's continue on the line that we were on. So
okay.
You're in college. We'll get to all that stuff.
All right.
So you're in college. What spiritual thing happened in college that made you decide that everything you had been taught might not be all the information?
Well, there was a whole bunch of things. You could say I became a little bit disillusioned with the policies of the government and the military, mostly, as I said, you know, before the break, because I met students at the university who had been in the military in Vietnam, soldiers on the ground, and what they were telling me was something completely different. It was kind of like more the apocalypse now kind of presentation than the John Wayne presentation.
So you started questioning everything at that point.
Started questioning everything, and I wound up, you know, from starting as a complete supporter of what was going on to an opponent. I went to the march on the Pentagon. I stayed until night, got arrested, and
nice.
You know, it was like and then another thing that happened to me was like in, I think it was the spring of 1968. I was sitting on the campus, you know, it was a beautiful spring day, and then we heard Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Oh. And then a little bit later, we told the entire town of Washington, D.C. is under military curfew, and the university is shutting down. Everyone has to go home. The 82nd Airborne is coming in, and you know, we saw these huge columns of smoke going up into the air because a large part of the city was burning. You know, like, so we kind of went home. I was living at a house off campus with some other guys. We had a house. And so we all went back to the house, and it was kind of getting dark. and the city was burning and the curfew was on. And then we made up a story because we wanted to go out into the city and see what was actually going on. So we made up a story that they were taking me to the airport, because I had to get home and something. And we kind of just started driving around the city, and we saw the 82nd Airborne troops everywhere, tanks or armored cars surrounding the White House and the Capitol. And it's something, as an American, you never expect to see. You expect to see, okay, the 82nd Airborne has gone to Vietnam. The 82nd Airborne has gone to wherever. At that time, you didn't expect, the 82nd Airborne to be coming in to Washington, D.C. Huh?
I've never heard this story. I never knew that.
Weren't there flying saucers there?
That also, but I wasn't so much aware of that part of it. But we kind of went to the areas where the rioting was taking place. And I kind of got out of the car. It was like I was really surprised, kind of what happened. It was like a very carnival-like atmosphere, like a street party was going on. It wasn't like angry or violent. It just sort of seemed, really surreal. And
I did. Never heard about.
So that was a little bit of a life-changing experience for me. And then, kind of at the same time, I was, like I said, at that time, I was still a little bit getting into the various forms of intoxication and hallucinogenics that at that time were being promoted as, everybody was reading The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, and there was this idea that the hallucinogenics were kind of an aid to consciousness liberation and
the whole
improvement and that whole thing. That was prominent at the time in the circles that I was moving along with.
Do you have one script that stands out?
Well, actually there is, and it had to, at that time, the CIA and other governments, they had this program called MK Ultra, where they were experimenting on the public, on members of the public with different kinds of hallucinogenics. And one of them was DMT. So a lot of people now, they've become interested in a hallucinogenic called ayahuasca. And
Graham Hancock is always talking about that.
Yeah, the psychoactive part of that is actually DMT. Yeah. But
have you tried DMT?
Well, I did, but here's how it happened. There was this scientist, government scientist, came to the university and gave a lecture. And I had a friend of mine who I knew from college, from the university, who worked with the CIA over the summer. He was an intern. And he told me about this professor who was going to come and give a talk about DMT at the university. So he said, "Do you want to go?" I said, "Sure, yeah, let's go." So I went, and I heard this guy talking about DMT and how it had been developed by the government because they had wanted a more intense form of psychedelic, like LSD. Was kind of interesting, but it wasn't as intense as they wanted, and it lasted a long period of time, too long a period of time. They had been interested, this scientist said, in developing a hallucinogenic that was much more powerful and that lasted a shorter period of time, not like 12 hours or 24 hours, but more like 2 hours or 1 hour. And they said they'd come up with this DMT thing that would. So I had been, and I'm kind of reconstructing this now. At the time, I wasn't really aware of these programs that the government had been involved in, and I just kind of went along with it. But now, kind of looking back at it, it seems more like it was I had kind of gotten recruited into one of these experiments, and right after the lecture. Right after the lecture, this friend of mine who had worked as an intern at the CIA and the assistant of the professor came up to me and they said, well, we have some of this DMT, laboratory pure grade DMT. Would you like to try it? Would you like to try it?
So, and what did you say?
Well,
what did you say?
Yeah, at the time, I was kind of ready for anything,
Yeah.
So I said, all right, sure. So we went to some apartment, and the way it was administered was like through a pipe to smoke. And they said, take in a big draft of it, take it, and then hold it in your lungs. And
now
I did.
This is like a college, experiment type thing situation?
Well, what I think is, when I put it all together, looking back at it, this friend of mine and I who worked as an intern over the summer for the CIA, the government scientist, the fact that the government agencies were running these experiments with psychoactive drugs on people, that's been admitted. And just how it happened, when it happened, the people involved in it. Why is it that the scientist who was involved in developing it was there, and then right after his lecture, pure DMT is being made available to people who came to the lecture? It was kind of. Maybe it all was just coincidence or something, but when I kind of look back at it, I think I was kind of recruited into kind of an experiment.
Absolutely. But, in fact, that's well known, isn't it? That the government did that. So you're part of the experiment. It sounds like.
It sounds like that.
The government is behind everything.
Well, people have to do something.
And the banks and
so
the medical
what happened with
system.
the trip? With that?
All right, I'll tell you what happened. It was probably the most intense drug experience that I had. Like I said,
wow.
I haven't. Ever since I began my involvement with practice of yoga and meditation, I've kind of completely abstain from any kind of alcohol or drug. I don't even use caffeine. I won't even. Right now I don't take caffeine. I won't take tea with caffeine or,
Oh
you know,
man,
none of that stuff.
you feel better after a while when you stop using that stuff. You find?
Well, there was only a very short period of my life where I kind of experimented with these things because it was just a part of the whole culture and the milieu, and everything's very difficult to get away from. So, all right, I did my experimenting with it, and I found, okay, I can do without that pretty easily.
Did you ever do anything really freaky, like when you were back in those days, like stick your hand into a rock and pull it back out again, or walk on coals, or levitate, or anything weird, produce electricity?
Okay. Let's just go through this experience first, and then I'll address some of those other things.
Nice.
But the first thing that happened was just basically everything just turned white. You just see the white light. Boom. That was the first thing. I took in. They said, okay, you take it into your lungs, hold it. So I took it into my lungs, I held it, and then everything just disappeared. It was a flash of white light, and then after what seemed to be a long time, the light started kind of quivering like an electronic field, and colors started coming back, and then very, very gradually, after 15 or 20 minutes, you could the field of vibrating colors started turning into cartoon-like forms of the people and the objects in the room. And then gradually, after about 30 or 40 minutes, things were kind of back to the level of a marijuana high. And after about 45 to 50 minutes or an hour, it was all back to normal. So
it's funny how you remember the details of it.
Well,
so many years later.
It was a pretty intense experience, from that point of view.
Did you see
Yeah,
Bourbon?
Well,
did you see the other side?
I don't know what you'd call it. I think it was like an artificial sort of thing that sort of would mimic a genuine experience like that. But I think to really get the realization of these higher states of existence requires some discipline, where you have to go through different stages of meditation and training and things like that, which I'm more into now than trying to artificially get there by taking some pill, which just wears off.
I've heard that before.
Huh?
That's like a shortcut to what you can get to if you just actually put in the time,
right,
and meditate.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to deny that for me, it was a step along the way to go through that experience.
Well, what did you take from it afterwards?
I took from it. I kind of knew, okay, this is not going to take me where I want to go. That's one thing I got out of it. And that's not the way to. I may have had a desire, to get out, to experience some alternative kind of reality, to kind of get out of the narrow, kind of very constricted worldview that I'd been raised in, you could say. But that was kind of more like a detour. All right, so then you learn, okay, now I'm not going to go down that road again.
So How long were you in college?
2 years.
You
And
never
then-
had to go to Vietnam, I take it.
Well, all right. So what happened is after the 2 years, I went to Europe. And when I went to Europe, I spent a long time there. And then, I kind of went in the summertime, and then it started getting colder. So I went south from England to France to Greece. And then from Greece, some people, they told me, well, if you go to Israel, you can stay in a kibbutz there over the winter and you won't spend any money. And you can even earn some money because they'll pay you for picking oranges or whatever. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do that, to kind of save my money a little bit. So I went and did that. And then when I was there, of course, now I was out of college, and when I was overseas, I got drafted into the Army, and I was a little slow in getting back. And so when I got back, they told me, we could arrest you and throw you in jail, but if you agree to enlist now, like you're supposed to, we'll just forget about it. So, they give you a choice. 2 years in the Army, which for sure means in the jungle, and 4 years in the Air Force or the Navy. So I took 4 years in the Navy, and you go through basic training, you go to a specialty school to learn something, and then they send you somewhere. Practically
Is that what
everybody,
you did?
Yeah, practically everybody they sent to Vietnam, they sent me to a weather station in Iceland.
Wow.
That's nice.
Weather station in
That came from
Iceland.
your father?
And we're at the top of the hour.
It was pretty interesting place. So
All right. Well, we'll come. You want to take another break, or should we just power through here?
Well, give the people a break.
It is midnight.
Give the people a
We'll go
break.
back to
The people
Iceland.
want a break.
And we will
Break
return
down.
after this. Grateful Dead. So many ways. For you, Darren.
Thought I heard a blackbird sing up on Bluebird Hill. Call me a wine boy, if you will. Gone when the sun don't shine, and I don't have my name. Got no place to go, ain't that a shame? But I heard that Casey whistle, moaning sweet and low. But I heard that Casey when she blow. Down where the sun don't shine, underneath the Kokomo. Wine boy got no place to go. Many roads, I tell you, so many roads I know. So many roads, so many roads. Mountain High, river wide, so many roads to ride. So many roads, so many roads. of the hill. Oh, I know the sun don't shine and the rain refuses to fall. You don't seem to hear me when I call. Hidden inside and the wind outside, tangled in the window blind. Tell me why you treat me so unkind. Well, the sun don't shine, I'm lonely and I call your name. No place left to go, ain't that a shame? So many roads, I tell you, no. All I want is one to take me home from the high road to the road. So many roads I know. So many roads, so many roads. From the land of the midnight sun, where the ice blue roses grow, along those roads of gold and silver snow, howling wide or mowing low, so many roads I rode, so many roads to ease my soul, so many roads to ease my soul. So many roads to ease my soul.
This is Igor from Monster Castle Interactive Radio Show, a sanctuary of free speech exploring the strange beauty of the universe and beyond. Fridays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Visit our website, monstercastleiinteractiveradio.ca. And we are back with Michael Cremo.
Yes.
The
And
Vedic
so he ended up going
Creationist. The
He
Vedic
ended up going
Creationist.
into the military. What year was this that you finally got out of training and went to Iceland?
Maybe 69, around there somewhere. It's I'd have to sit down and map it all out, but it's around that period. 69, 70.
I was
Around-
2.
Around that time that I went to this, I was put at this weather station in Iceland, but I kind of liked Iceland. You know, it was a very strange place. Iceland is very unusual. Like, the weather's really crazy there. You know, at that time, you know, my mother and father, and they were living in Florida. You know, so sometimes in the winter time, it was warmer in Iceland than it was in Florida. You know, which sounds really crazy because Iceland is up there. It's about at the Arctic Circle. But what would happen was, like, because I was at this weather station, so I learned about all this stuff, is what they call the Arctic high would come down, and it would go over Iceland, and it'd be freezing. And then it'd go, and then the Gulf Stream would be coming up from the south and bringing with it warm, wet weather. and then sometimes the Atlantic low would press up over Iceland, and then it would rain. It'd be about 40 degrees, and then Florida, it might be a cold snap, 32 degrees or something. So it would actually be warmer in Iceland than it would be in Florida in like January. Yeah, really crazy.
What an interesting
so,
place to be a weatherman.
And so it would be like one day you're in Iceland and it would rain. Then the next day it'd be freezing cold. All the rain would freeze. And then there'd be this huge wind blowing. And I remember one day you'd have to walk from your barracks to the mess hall, the place where they served out food. And I remember once I was walking and the wind was so strong, it blew me down, actually knocked me down, literally, and blew me across. There was this ice that had been covered by a little tiny bit of rainwater. It was slick like anything. So the wind knocked me down and blew me across this field, on this
How far?
ice. About 40 or 50 yards, half the length of a football field. It was, and then I had this really strange schedule at the weather station. I would be 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12 hours on, 24 hours off, 12 hours on, then 96 hours off. So 96 hours is 4 days. So every few days I'd get 4 days straight off, which means I was free to go anywhere and do anything I wanted for 4 days, a couple times a month.
And what would you do?
Well, I did some interesting things. I I took some courses. They had they have a deal in the military where the University of Maryland lets you take college level courses on the bases around the world. So I took courses in Old Icelandic, which is the language of the sagas and the Vikings, and it's still the modern language that the people in Iceland today speak. They speak like, if you ever read Beowulf as Old English literature, you can hardly recognize it today.
Beowulf.
But it's like
really
Norse, isn't it?
It's like Norse, but that's what the people in Iceland today speak. They speak Old Norse. So it was, really kind of interesting. And the whole place, it's like full of volcanoes and glaciers, but to really understand what happened to me in Iceland, I got to go back to when I was 8 years old and our family was living in Hawaii. So
okay.
My father was in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. So our family was living in Hawaii. So when I was about 8 years old, we took a family vacation to the Big Island in Hawaii, and we went on a tour of the Kilauea volcano. And there were these Hawaiian guides, kahunas, that took us down the crater, down into the crater of the Kilauea volcano, which is a big round, at that time anyways, it was a big round crater, like a crater on the moon, with kind of like these steep walls that go along the circumference of it. And you kind of take a little trail that goes down the steep wall, you go to the bottom of the volcano, you walk quite a ways across the center of the crater, and you come in the very middle to what they call the fire hole, which is where the lava would come up. And so these Hawaiian guides had me offer some fruits and flowers into that fire hole to the goddess Pele, who is the goddess of fire and volcanoes and things like that. Because, and they told me, now, whenever you go into the realm of volcanoes, this goddess Pele will protect you. All right, so then fast forward to Iceland, 15, 18 years later. And I'm in Iceland, and during one of these 4-day breaks I have, I went with a friend of mine to this volcano, Hekla, and we heard that this volcano was erupting, not a massive eruption into the sky, blasting all kinds of material, thousands of feet into the sky, but there was just like a break in the side of the mountain from which kind of like a river of lava was flowing across this black sand desert that surrounded this volcano, Hekla.
God.
And, like Jules Verne had this novel, Journey to the Center of the Earth, where some scientists, they went to Iceland and they went down inside Hekla on a journey to the center of the earth, and they found dinosaurs and all that kind of stuff.
It's kind of like the Hollow Earth thing.
Yeah, I think it was like made into a movie or something. But
so what did you find?
Well,
what was
what we did is we went to Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland, and we rented a Land Rover because there's no roads that go out to this place. You got to drive across the black sand desert, across glacial streams, to get out to this place. So we drove this Land Rover out to the volcano, which is like a big, low mountain. And during the Middle Ages, it was considered the gateway to hell. And in Europe. But, kind of like we saw this river of lava kind of coming out, from the side of the volcano and flowing across this black sand desert. As it kind of got further away from the volcano, the source of the lava, parts of it were becoming solid. So it's like you had these big, huge black chunks of lava kind of flowing along on the molten lava. So what I did is I kind of jumped onto one of those pieces and rode it along for a while.
No, you did not.
Absolutely did. Absolutely did.
That is awesome.
You asked me if I ever did anything weird, like put my hand through molten rock or whatever.
Wasn't it too hot?
Well, it was, and actually what we did is we kind of cooked our lunch over the lava. Because like we'd brought some of this, like soup powder. There's this company called Knorr, Knorr, that makes, like if you're backpacking or something like that, you can have powdered soup. You just add water. So we had a pot. We put some ice and snow in it, and we put it on the lava. And after a while, it started getting boiling, and pour in the soup powder, and we had soup and sandwiches.
So okay,
I'm telling you, I've lived a very interesting life.
Okay.
I
just want to dive into this specifically. Now,
so what we did is, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
Right.
You insist.
So there's
if you insist, Wolfman and Darren, I'll do it.
Okay.
But,
you go ahead. Oh, how about can I go ahead? Do you mind? Oh, no, you go ahead.
I have
So-
visions of Star Wars and lava.
So-
And
Go
flow.
ahead.
So we kind of sat on this hill that was kind of overlooking the river of lava that was sort of flowing, and it was kind of
Okay.
interesting. We were, well, just to digress a little bit, at the very end of the lava flow, it was sort of all, gradually the very end of it became almost completely solidified at the very end of the flow. And it was sort of moving
Sure.
forward a little bit, and pieces would break off and fall down. And it'd make a sound like, if you had like a bunch of concrete blocks in a wheelbarrow and you dumped them down a hill, it kind of goes chunk, 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 chunk. And at the
Sure.
same time, they were very hot. So they were making this crinkly sound, tinkle, 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 like something's very hot and it's kind of expanding, it makes this tinkling sound. So it was just really, it was like being at a kind of a weird, kind of atonal concert. You're standing in the middle of Iceland at the end of this lava flow in the kind of the midnight sun, and you're hearing all these strange sounds.
That would be a great
tinkle,
recording.
Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle.
Was there anybody else around? Were other
There was
people
a
there,
friend
or were
of-
you guys by yourself?
There was this Navy buddy of mine who we would just dare each other to do stuff, so we were kind of there. We were kind of on this hill overlooking the lava flow, eating our lunch that we cooked on the lava, taking the soup and the sandwiches and stuff. And then the hill started shaking. And we
God.
just ran off the hill, ran all the way back to the Land Rover, turned around, and the hill that we'd been sitting on exploded. And, this huge plume of ash and smoke just went thousands of feet into the air.
And then the dragon emerged.
The dragon,
That's unbelievable.
the dragon emerged. You could say that in the sense that you could see red lava shooting up out of the top of the hill. So then
Talons ripping through
then
the
we kind
ground.
of drove back to Reykjavik and went back to the base. Then a couple weeks later, I went back out to the same place, and the kind of like the little hill had become like a cinder cone about 300 or 400 feet high, and lava was shooting out of it. And at that time, there were a bunch of people out there also. Like I said, this is not like a place where there's an ordinary road, so you had to have some kind of off-road vehicle to get out there. But there was about 20 or 30 people kind of, out there at this time. When I first went there was just me and my buddy, and, but this second
You're
time
lucky.
it was
You're
still,
not dead.
it was, yeah, but listen to this. Like like I said, it's about 300 or 400 feet high now, what they call like a cinder cone, like all the lava had kind of built up a cone, and it was shooting out lava from the top of it. And like being like in Iceland, like I said, there's always a very strong wind blowing there. So I was looking at the lava. When it would shoot out, it would go up into the air, and then the wind would blow it to one side. So the lava was kind of like falling down on one side. So what I did, again, like I would do all kinds of crazy things when I was that age, I went up the backside of the cinder cone, and I climbed all the way. I climbed all the way to the top, and I looked down inside, and I saw that there were 3 fire holes, and they were firing one after another in rotation. Like the first one would go, a bunch of lava would go into the air, and the wind would blow it forward on the other side of the cinder cone. And then the next one would go off, boom, and onto and then the next one would go off, boom, blow it. So I kind of watched it go through. I watched it go through a couple rotations like that, and then I went back down, and this guy I went with this time was a friend of mine from George Washington University who was on his way to Europe, and I told him, why don't you stop in and see me, on your way to Europe, and we'll go out to this volcano. So we did that. and
I can't believe you'd go back after almost dying. And then you'd climb the cone.
Why not?
Why?
But I did crazy things like that. We went down a ski hill in our kung fu shoes.
How hot was it when you were looking down and those 3 were firing off?
Well, like I said, the wind was at my back, going about 30 or 40 miles an hour and blowing the lava, like when it would shoot out, it would go pretty much straight up, and it would blow everything the opposite direction. That's the only reason I went up there.
Do you have photos?
Like I had some. I've got one left somehow, because I travel around a lot. I sent pictures home to my parents, and then my father died, my mother died. Where all their stuff went, I don't know. But I got one picture of me standing at the end of the lava flow where it had solidified. So I've got that. There used to be a picture. One of the ones I sent home showed me standing with the hill, like when it first went off, with the column of ash going into the air and back of me, about a mile away. So,
did you feel protected from the
yes,
god?
I did. Well, yeah, because my friend, like the first time I went there, this is why I told you I had to say something about going to Hawaii first. My friend said, when we kind of looked back at that hill and saw the dragon coming out of it, in other words, the red lava flows, which may have been the dragon, like you were saying. When we saw that, he said to me, we're very lucky. We could have been killed. I said,
yes.
Maybe. I had my little Pele amulet, and I said, maybe it wasn't luck, because of that offering I made to Pele. And they told me, whenever you go into the realm, they even gave me a little certificate. Whenever you go into the realm of volcanoes, Pele will protect you.
Isn't the Iceland volcanoes way more volatile than Hawaii?
Well, I did get. I think you're right. Those particular, and you can look it up. Like 1969, 70 eruptions of Hekla. It's there. Potentially, yes, I think they are. But even Hawaii potentially is very explosive. I mean, they're basically similar things. Iceland and Hawaii are both volcanic islands that have risen out of the sea because of very big volcanoes coming up from the seafloor. So both Hawaii and Iceland are volcanic islands. So I think they're kind of similar. But another time,
I was
few
going to
years
ask you
ago,
something.
I went to Italy. I went to Italy for a conference. I spoke at a conference in Rimini,
gosh.
Rimini, Italy, which is on the Adriatic Sea. And I had flown to Europe, and then when the conference was over, I was going to fly back. But all the flights in Europe were grounded because the volcano in Iceland had erupted and was throwing
Yes.
huge amounts. So I had to.
I remember that.
Yeah. So I was, I was in Rimini, and I had gone to Bologna, which is the nearest big city. I was going to go to the airport there, and then I found that all the flights are canceled. So, I got in touch with the organizer of the conference, and he said, "Okay, I know this guy who's got a villa on the hills outside Bologna, and you can, if you don't mind staying in this Italian villa for a few days for free, I'll let you do that."
I don't mind.
Yes, just a villa, no Maserati. Said, you just go to the villa, stay there a few days. So, okay,
all right,
so
we have a break coming up.
Yeah, we do have a break coming up here.
let's give people a break, definitely.
All right. Yeah, man.
Join us.
I got something for you. This is a band called Sifar, and it is from India, and it's Hindi rock.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Have any George Harrison songs?
I adjusted that.
Got
to the Rockies, you can call in at 360-313-8337. Those tasty Canadians can call in too. Call 226-317-3331. Call in on Skype for a really good sound. Search for Wolfman Mike 47 or hashtag 47Talk, which is also where you'll find him on Twitter. Go to the links page on monstercastleiinteractiveradio.ca and join our Discord for the very best way to talk live in the castle. Just go to the drawbridge and we will pull you inside the castle.
I didn't hear it. If the caller or whoever you brought in said hi,
Okay.
didn't hear it.
We're
but
back on the air anyway. We are back on the air with Michael Cremo. I think we have somebody is here with a question on line number 1. Apocalypse.
No, I pushed him back in there. You want me to pull him? He didn't have a question.
Okay. I thought he had
go.
a question.
No, I pulled him in. Just wanted to say hi. All right.
Go
We're
ahead.
back.
Where did we leave off? We were in
Well, he's like
a
surfing
villa?
on volcanic.
we were in an Italian villa.
Oh yeah, forgot.
yeah, we were talking about the ice. You were talking about how big and active Icelandic volcanoes are. So, a few years ago, I was in Italy speaking at a conference in Rimini, which is on the Adriatic coast. Beautiful town, beautiful conference. And then after it, I was going to catch a flight from Bologna, nearest big city, back to the States. And all the flights were canceled because a big Icelandic volcano had erupted and was filling the skies full of volcanic ash, which messes around with jet airliner engines, and therefore all the flights in Europe had been grounded. So I was stuck in Bologna for a few days, and I called up the conference organizer, and he said, well, I got a friend there, and he's got a villa in the mountains, in the hills around Bologna. So if you don't mind staying a few days in this villa, you can have it all to yourself for as long as you need it. So I stayed the next few days in that villa outside Bologna. It was very nice. And then when the flight started again, I went back to LA.
How did you like staying in the villa?
Well, sometimes you got to put up with these things sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
So
let's get to your when did you first decide that you thought you might want to write a book?
I always thought I wanted to write a book. Like when I was even maybe like 2 years old, my mother, she said she would give me alphabet soup to eat. And she said I wouldn't eat it. I would just spell out words in the bowl. And I kind of take that as a sign that writing is something I've been doing for many lifetimes, not just this lifetime. So I've always thought I was going to write a book.
But were you good at spelling?
Yeah, actually, I was. I won some spelling bees.
Ah!
What about ants?
Oh.
Did you?
In school, you go to first grade, second grade. I mean, not like a national spelling bee. That you got to be really good for.
What was your first book? Was it Forbidden Archaeology?
No, I was explaining, I became, eventually a disciple of the guru who brought the Hare Krishna movement from India to the United States in the 1960s. And people like George Harrison became interested in his teachings. And so part of the practice of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, which is the form of yoga and meditation that I practice, part of Bhakti Yoga means taking whatever talent and ability that you have and using it for a spiritual purpose. So in that way, like if you're an artist, then your art becomes part of your yoga and meditation. If you're a writer, then writing becomes part of your yoga and meditation. So I kind of use my writing like that. So one of the first books that I was involved in writing was a book called Coming Back, The Science of Reincarnation, where I wrote with some co-authors a book about the philosophy of reincarnation. And then I wrote a book about mantra meditation with actually George Harrison contributed an interview for it because he engaged in mantra meditation on the Hare Krishna mantra. And another one of my co-authors, Michael Grant, he was another member of the Hare Krishna movement, and he knew the Beatles in London, and they produced an album on Apple Records, which became a #1 best-selling album in England based on the Hare Krishna mantra. And George Harrison played and sang on that album and was the producer of it. And Michael kind of knew him. So, so we had this book about mantra meditation, and then we had another book about it was about a vegetarian diet, karma-free diet, and so
Nice.
so I was writing things like that. Then in 1984. The publishers that I was working for, it was like the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, they said, we'd like you to work on some science-related projects. So there was another member of the Hare Krishna movement. He was a mathematician. He had a PhD in mathematics from Cornell University. His name was Richard Thompson. So we kind of worked together to produce some books about the Vedic approach to the sciences. And I was kind of given the archaeology topic to work on. And,
Okay.
so my first book, you could say, of the kind that people most know me for today was the book Forbidden Archaeology, which is, it's based on a concept that comes from the Vedic histories, namely that humans have existed for millions and millions of years on Earth. And you don't see that evidence in the textbooks today, but there are scientific reports of archaeologists finding human bones, human artifacts, human footprints, millions and millions of years old. So it took me 8 years to do the research for that book, because in the beginning I thought, okay, yeah, maybe there's some evidence like that. Maybe there's a few cases. Maybe I'll do 8 days of research. I'll find a few interesting cases, and then we'll just write this short little pamphlet about it, and I'll go on to something else. But when I got into this topic, I found the 8 days of research turned into 8 weeks. The 8 weeks turned into 8 months. The 8 months turned into 8 years. Because when I started digging into this, one case just led to another and another and another. Hundreds of these cases.
This is my favorite part of listening to you before, like on Art Bell, is all the specific things you found. So what was the first thing you found? You latched onto the very first artifact.
Well, here's how this really worked. I looked at the history of archaeology, and basically around 1859, you have Charles Darwin coming out with his book, The Origin of Species, which proposed the theory of evolution. So scientists, including Darwin, later applied that theory specifically to human beings. And then they proposed human beings evolved from apes and monkeys. So that means there had to be some intermediates between the primitive apes and monkeys that lived 40 or 50 million years ago and anatomically modern humans like us. So I thought,
which they've never found.
Well, here's what happened. I thought, then they must have immediately went out and started looking for those missing links. And, I thought, well, what's going on here? Because they don't really mention any missing links until about the beginning of the 20th century.
Really?
It's not that long ago.
At the very end of the 19th century, in the 1890s, there was this Dutch researcher, Dubois, who found in Java, which the Netherlands ruled at that time, part of Indonesia, that was a colony of the Dutch people at that time. So they had found this missing link, ape man, they called Pithecanthropus erectus, at a site called Trinil in Java. So I kind of wondered, why is there this big gap between, say, 1859, when Darwin published his Origin of Species, about 40 years in there, that there's no, scientists were going all over the world, all over Europe. And in the textbooks today, it kind of mentions, Darwin published his book, Origin of Species, and in 1893, Dubois found this missing link. And, I kind of wondered, why is there this big gap, between 1859 and, So I had a research assistant that was helping me out with the research. So I said, get me the anthropology and archaeology textbooks from the 1860s, the 1870s, the 1880s. And he did that. He went out and got all these out-of-print books from the 1860s, 70s, 80s. And when I looked in them, there were all kinds of discoveries, not of missing links existing millions of years ago, but humans like us existing millions and millions of years ago. So then I saw what really happened. Darwin writes this book, The Origin of Species. Scientists go out looking for missing links. They don't find them. What they find is evidence that humans like us were existing millions and millions of years ago. and they were reporting it in their scientific publications, speaking about these things at their scientific conferences, and displaying these things in museums all over Europe. And they could do that because they hadn't fixed their timeline yet. But then what happened is, like in 1893, Dubois finds this missing link in Java. And after it becomes accepted, then they have to decide what they're going to do with all this. Because if they found this missing link in layers of rock about 1 million years old. So they decided, okay, anything human has to come after that, because this is the missing link. Anything human has to come.
How do they
way
know
after.
for sure that rock is that old? Like,
Well, they're trying to.
Well, they use.
Could they be wrong?
The potassium argon method. They've got their dating methods for dating the rock. But I'm just saying
that's where I'm skeptical.
Yeah, that could be possible. But I'm saying what happened in their world, in their scientific world. So they decided anything human has to be younger than that. And then they had to decide, what are we going to do with all this evidence that we've accumulated in the 1880s, 1870s, and 1860s, showing that modern humans existed millions of years ago before this missing link. So they got rid of all that. You know, the things in the museum went into the storerooms. The things that were published no longer mentioned. You know, cast into oblivion. And, you know, so all that previous work was just left out of the picture. And then after that time, when anybody would find anything that looked anatomically modern human and was older than it should be, they reinterpreted it to make it fit the timeline, or they said, oh, this has got to be a hoax or a mistake or an illusion, something. They would just find some way to make it fit. And I give you a very recent example of that. Just like a year or two ago, there were some archaeologists working at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania in East Africa. And they found a finger bone there. And they found it in layers of rock 1,800,000 years old. And then,
oh my God!
And then they carefully studied it and they measured it, and they compared it to the same finger bone in different species of apes, monkeys, and different kinds of missing links, ape men like Homo erectus, Australopithecus. And they also compared it to that same finger bone in anatomically modern human populations. And they found it was different than any ape or monkey, different than any hominin species, ape man species like Neanderthal or Homo erectus or whatever. And they found it was exactly like that of a modern human being.
I'm loving the creepy sounds.
But in their scientific report, they said, and this is published in Nature Communications, which is a very prominent mainstream scientific publication. They said, this thing resembles a modern human finger bone, a Homo sapiens finger bone, but we can't call it a Homo sapiens finger bone because Homo sapiens didn't exist
Yeah.
1,800,000 years ago.
It's the wrong answer.
So I kind of say give him the finger because I say, well, why not? You say it's different than any ape or monkey finger bone, different than any known intermediate like Homo erectus or whatever, and exactly like an anatomically modern human finger, and it's found in a formation 1,800,000 years old. Why the heck not call it Homo sapiens? And but it's kind of like this process of what I call knowledge filtration that goes on in the world of science, so that they can actually be looking at something and just not seeing it for what it is. And there was once a very famous psychological experiment that was done that kind of illustrates this principle. Now, psychologists took a deck of cards, and then they altered some of the cards in the deck. Say like you have a 6 of spades, it would normally be black. They made it red. They took a 4 of hearts, normally would be red. They made it black 4 of hearts. So they had a deck of cards with these altered cards in them. And so in the experiment, what they would do is they would show a person each card in the deck and ask the person to identify the card. All right, so they show like a 2 of diamonds, the normal color. Person say 2 of diamonds. And then they show them the 4 of hearts, black. And the person look at it and say 4 of spades. But even though they're looking at the card, they're not seeing it. They're not seeing what's actually in front of their eyes. They're seeing what they expect to see. And they found nobody would get it right. Nobody would perceive the anomaly.
It felt it's about expectations.
They would just make it fit into their preconceived notions. So scientists do the same thing. They can actually, like these archaeologists at Olduvai Gorge, they can actually be looking directly at evidence that tells them Homo sapiens existed almost 2 million years ago, but they won't see it for what it really is. They'll just look at it and say, oh, well, that can't be Homo sapiens, because we all know Homo sapiens didn't exist at that time. So they just not see it, even though it's staring them right in the face. So I call it a process of knowledge filtration. And the way it works is that evidence that kind of conforms to the consensus, fits in with everything, it passes through the filter. But if there's something that radically contradicts the filter, well, we ignore it, put it aside, reinterpret it, dismiss it on flimsy grounds. And this happens in all kinds of fields. Like, say, one thing that's really surprising to me, it's like after my book, Forbidden Archaeology, was published in 1993, it was first published, I started getting invitations to UFO conferences. And I kind of wondered, what's going on here? Here I am. I'm talking about stones and bones, and they're talking about UFOs and ETs, and they want to hear me talk. Why? So when I kind of got to the conference, I could kind of see why. Because they could see the same process of knowledge filtration going on in their field. Where you have very competent observers reporting UFOs, extraterrestrials, abductions, all of this stuff. Very competent people reporting it, but it just doesn't make it through the knowledge filter to get into the education system or the mainstream media, except on History Channel, of course. Ancient aliens and all that. But
yeah, ancient.
So it kind of operates in all these different paranormal fields of research. You can see this knowledge filtering process going on.
Michael, is the reason that maybe they don't want to let this type of information out is because people like the Amish and cultures like that would go in complete shock?
What was that?
Oh, she's saying that religious views, some cultures would be culture shock.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
Culture
I
shock.
think that can be part of it. And actually, you know, we all kind of do some knowledge filtering. You know, we don't just believe everything that anybody tells us about anything. You know, we all have our standards. You know, we all do a little bit of knowledge filtering. You know, we you have to. So, but the problem that I'm talking about in the scientific world is that if you're going to do your knowledge filtering, you ought to apply whatever standard you're applying equally, not like, you know, say like you have a policeman. You know, policeman could probably find an excuse to arrest anybody, you know, for something. You know, like a traffic policeman, you could probably find some reason to stop and arrest anybody for any reason. You know, but like, you know, but like, say like you got the policeman for the people he likes. All right, you're going 7 miles over the limit, fine. But then for somebody he doesn't like, throws the book at him. You know.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, or if he's just having a bad day in general, you know, it could be anyone.
Yeah, like a bad day or a building inspector. You can probably find some reason to condemn any building in the city. This isn't up to code. Sorry, we got to give you a citation on this.
Oh, and those people can be tipped off too for somebody else.
What I mean. You know, for your friend, you look at it, all right, who cares? It's not up to code. But for the guy that you hate, all right, you know, like this, I'm sorry, this is not up to code. You know, like you got, you know, so that's where it becomes a little bit problematic, like in science, for the things that kind of fit your preconceptions. All right, you let it pass. You know, and then for something that you don't like, then you kind of apply this very strict standard to it that even the evidence that you put in the textbooks couldn't pass if you held it to the same standard.
Gosh,
so it's kind of like you got to be a little bit even-handed in the way that you apply the standards. So that's where the problem comes in, because we all do. I filter knowledge, you filter knowledge, we all filter knowledge, but we try to be upfront about what our biases are, and we're willing to talk about them, and
we're
try.
For a break here, Michael.
Yeah, the people deserve a break. We've been putting some heavy stuff.
I can't believe we've gone this far already.
Are you okay?
Going by like a magic carpet ride.
Yeah, let's do that.
And we'll be right back. Welcome to the castle. The people that stuck around got inside the castle. I'd like to, you know, in the Discord chat room.
Looks so phony. Dawn is breaking every
west of the Rockies, you can call in at 360-313-8337. Those tasty Canadians can call in too. Call 226-317-3331. Call in on Skype for a really good sound. Search for Wolfman Mike 47 or hashtag 47Talk, which is also where you'll find him on Twitter. Go to the links page on monstercastleinteract.radio.ca and join our Discord for the very best way to talk live in the castle. Just go to the drawbridge and we will pull you inside the castle. And we are live.
All right.
Monster Castle Interact Radio.
Hi, JP.
He has written his book in 1984, 3?
I started the research for forbidden archaeology in the 1980s, and then it was first published in 1993, and then since that time, I brought out other books like Human Devolution and Forbidden Archaeology's Impact, The Forbidden Archaeologist, and My Science, My Religion, and continue to put out books on this about the basic topic of human origins and antiquity. Yeah. So
Can you tell us about some artifacts? I love the artifacts that were found.
Yeah.
That don't fit into.
Well, one of my classic cases that I really like is the California gold mine discoveries, because during the mid-19th century, during what they call the California Gold Rush, miners came from all over the world to the Sierra Nevada mountains in central California to dig for the gold. And they were digging tunnels into sides of mountains like Table Mountain near the town of Sonora in central California. And then deep inside these tunnels, the miners were finding human bones and human artifacts. They were finding obsidian spear points. They were finding stone mortars and pestles and human bones, as I said. And what makes these things interesting for me is they're found in layers of solid rock that modern geologists tell us are about 50 million years old. So that, these things were reported to the scientific world by Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California. His report was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. But you just don't hear about these things today because of the process of knowledge filtration that I was talking about. So there was this anthropologist, William Holmes, who was a contemporary of Whitney's. He worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. And he said, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he wouldn't have published those discoveries despite the imposing array of testimony with which he was confronted. So that's kind of academic speak. I'll translate it. It means, well, the facts don't fit the theory of evolution, so the facts should be cast into oblivion. And basically that's what happened. But some of the artifacts from the California gold mines are still in the Museum of Anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley. So I got permission from the directors of the museum to study those artifacts. They're not kept in the museum itself. They're kept today in a storage building some distance from the museum, and it's a really complicated process to get access to them, but I did, and I presented a report about them at a meeting of the World Archaeological Congress that took place in Washington,
Did you like
D.C.
sneak in there? Did you sneak in there?
Well,
How did
actually,
you get in there?
No.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting. That's a really good question because
Yes.
basically among the archaeologists today, there are two groups, two basic groups. One group I call the archaeology singular group. And, they believe there's one scientific, objective science of archaeology, and we know everything, and
don't
they
let
don't want to
anybody
hear
else touch it.
Don't everybody else? They don't like what I do. They don't want to hear what I do.
I jump
they don't
fences.
Want anybody else to hear it. But there's another group of archaeologists today that I call the archaeologies group, plural, which means they think, okay, yes, we have our Western scientific archaeology, but that's only one of many possible archaeologies. There could be a Native American Indian archaeology. There could be an Australian Aboriginal archaeology. There could be a Vedic archaeology.
Or penguin archaeology.
Whatever. So they're a little more open-minded to alternative presentations.
Michael.
So it's kind of scientists in that group who let me speak at conferences like this.
Did you get to see the stuff, though? Did you get to see the stuff and make sure that it was old? And did you do any tests on it?
I did. I was able to take photographs of the artifacts, confirm that they are, in fact, there. Well, one thing I saw is the original labels that Dr. Whitney put on them. Because, like I said, at one time, these were displayed in the museums. They were officially reported in the scientific literature. He spoke about them at the mainstream conferences, scientific conferences of his time. So one thing they have in the museum collection is the original labels where he gives the ages of these things of millions of years. So at one time, these things were displayed in the Museum of Anthropology and with labels showing they belong to geological periods that are tens of millions of years old. And then it was only at a certain point of time that these things were removed from display when scientists decided, okay, this
didn't fit into the...
Doesn't fit. Just like that Professor Holmes at the Smithsonian Institution said, if Whitney really understood, our theory, how Java Man, like I was explaining in the beginning, once they had this Java Man, Pithecanthropus erectus, missing link discovery at about 1 million years, they decided, okay, anything human's got to be younger than that.
Yeah.
Anything older, like these California gold mine discoveries, well, we're not going to talk about that anymore. And as I said, this is something that happened around the turn of the century, around 1900 or so, when they kind of got their timeline fixed. And then all this evidence that had been reported previous to that time, like Whitney's report, which was published by Harvard University in 1880. And he had these objects on display in the Museum of Anthropology at the University of California with labels showing an age of tens of millions of years, kind of like after the turn of the century when ideas like Holmes had became the mainstream consensus. Then they had to deep six, get rid of all these discoveries that had previously been made by very prominent scientists. Under
Michael, did you see them? I mean, did you see them? Were you able to? The artifacts, and it could be carbon date them, and
well, you can't carbon date artifacts like that. You could find some method that would let you say like if you have a spear point carved out of stone. Okay, if you applied some radiometric method, you could find out how old the stone is, but that doesn't tell you when it was made into a spear point. That you can only tell by looking at the age of the formation, the geological formation in which the object was found. If you
in Northern California, when they found these artifacts, they were digging for gold, and they found arrowheads in the rock.
That's right.
And then he just pulled them out, and then they posted them in the museum, and then nobody believed it.
Right. Well, see, it was, like Whitney, who was a Harvard-trained geologist and was the chief government geologist of California. He heard about these discoveries. So he went out to the mines. He personally verified them, did his own studies, published this whole extensive report, that was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. And, here we're just talking about one case. There are hundreds of cases like this. So, and it's a pattern. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Willie.
What is Mr. Whitney? Why does this Harvard guy, and you bring it up, and I respect you, man, but it sounds like name dropping, because why does this guy deserve the credit that he's getting as opposed to the most famous archaeological guy of his time? Right around that time, came up with the false goddamn crystal skulls that was exposed as a hoax between himself and his daughter. What gives this guy any more credibility than that guy? Who would say above him?
It's a good question.
No, that's a good question.
And you sounded awesome.
Everybody has a right to make up their own minds about these things. If you look at my books, I give all sides of the story, and I leave it up to the reader to make up their mind when they've heard all sides of the story. And if they make up their minds in a certain way that may not be the same way that I make up my mind, I respect the right of each individual to do that.
I wasn't trying to make that question personal about you at all.
No. But I'm saying how I operate. That I respect the right of each individual to make up their own mind. I'm an individual, and I've made up my mind, and I can tell you why I've made up.
Yeah, we live in America. We just want proof, man. We want proof. That's it.
Right.
What's your favorite artifact that you've seen that it's like, I know this is super old, and I know that, this.
I like
What's
the California.
what's the best one?
The California. I think that to me, the most convincing thing is the fact that there are hundreds of cases like this. But among the hundreds of cases, if people were to ask me what are my favorites, I would say the California gold mine discoveries are among my favorites, because the accounts of the discoveries, first of all, the artifacts do exist. The scientific reports exist. You can compare the original reports to the modern geological account of the ages of the formations. You can look at the credibility of the person who's writing the reports. You can look at the thoroughness of the reports. You can, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And when I look at all of the factors, and then when I look at the criticisms of the original reports, I don't find them to be very, convincing.
Credible.
So and then among, the case that I just mentioned, I don't know if you heard it, but, I was talking about some very recent discoveries, like this finger bone found at Olduvai Gorge, by modern archaeologists.
I heard about
they
that.
Look at it, they say it's completely human in form. It's different from any kind of hominin like Australopithecus or Homo erectus, different from the same finger bone in any kind of ape or monkey, fits squarely in the anatomically modern human group, Homo sapiens. But we can't call it Homo sapiens because it's 1,800,000 years old.
I didn't know they did that. I read an article and it was just saying that, like basically what you said. Where was that? Was that the one in somewhere in Asia?
Nature Communications,
Where?
Tanzania, Olduvai Gorge, in Tanzania, and so that's to me that's a very convincing case where they say
I don't want to go off topic, but I'm just curious, Mr. Cremo.
Sure.
What the hell do you do for fun? Like on a weekend, if you weren't talking to us, what do you do for fun?
What do you do for fun, Michael?
I do lava surfing. It all depends, if there's, I looked at a couple weekends ago, I kind of looked at the college football playoffs. I found that kind of interesting. I kind of like that. I'm 71 years old.
Convincing at all. Holy shit! You
didn't like? You don't like LSU?
And that was unconvincing. You are not a football fan, friends.
You think not? You think not?
You just said it took you 5 minutes to say I investigated a college football playoff game. Come on, man. You asked me what I did on a recent. You asked me what I did on a recent weekend. Oh, I said, what do you do for fun? Not on a recent
Willie,
weekend.
will you stop shouting, please, sir?
Football game.
He watches college football.
Now you behave yourself, young man.
Fun. Check yourself.
That was not a college football fan.
I want to know what
3 minutes.
When did you see Led Zeppelin, Michael? Tell us about your Led Zeppelin story.
Oh, I just happened to see them when they came through Iceland. They played a concert in Reykjavik, so I went to it. They talk about, in their songs, some of them, they deal with Norse sort of themes, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Just so we're square.
Yeah, and then sometimes for fun, I come on radio shows and do interviews.
Yeah, that's a fun thing. I don't mind doing that.
And talk with some of the guests. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, especially drunk ones with really dumb questions.
Actually, probably, he wouldn't. What I really do for fun, he probably wouldn't think is a lot of fun. Research stone tools. Meditate on mantras.
Yeah. That sounds groovy, man. And we're at the bottom of the hour.
We're at a break.
So he'd probably think that's not a whole lot of fun.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with it.
Fuck you, Wolfman.
And let's see what I got here. I got something special. Let's see what the something is special.
Break.
It's
our last break, Michael.
I will put on some Hare Krishna music. How about that? There we go.
Is it Harry or
This is the Monster Castle Paranormal Radio Show. We explore the paranormal phenomenon with researchers and skeptics from all walks of life and beyond. Fridays and Saturdays, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
Monster Castle Paranormal Radio with Michael Cremo, and we're gonna get right down to detail. Yeah.
Yes. Give us some artifacts.
I'm thinking of, let's hone in and pick something that you would present as maybe not like the best proven evidence to support what we all know to be true.
How long has humanity been here? Yeah,
like those. I've heard stories since I was a kid about like the footprints that were in strata of stone that were a million years old, modern man footprints, and
let's go over some footprints. Let's do that. Are we on the air?
Yeah, we're on the air.
We are
live. We're back on the air, and we're going to talk about footsteps in the distant times.
Yeah.
So, like, there was a case in 1979. Mary Leakey, who was a very prominent archaeologist in her own right, the wife of Louis Leakey, another prominent archaeologist. She discovered at a place called Laetoli in the country of Tanzania in East Africa some footprints. And these footprints were found in layers of solidified volcanic ash, 3,700,000 years old. So when she looked at the footprints, she said they were indistinguishable from anatomically modern human footprints. In other words, they were just like the footprints that you or I might make if we were walking on a beach or something like that. So there were dozens of these footprints of three individuals who had been walking in this volcanic ash that was later solidified and turned into stone. And how did she interpret the footprints? She didn't think, even though she said they were indistinguishable from modern human footprints, and other scientists also agreed with her. Paleontologist Tim White said, yes, make no mistake about it, these are like modern human footprints. Now, neither Mary Leakey nor Tim White thought that humans like us made the footprints. So how did they explain them? Well, they said, 3 or 4 million years ago, there must have existed in Africa some kind of ape man who had feet exactly like modern human feet. Now, that's an interesting proposal, but there's no physical evidence for it. Scientists have discovered the skeletal remains of the missing links, the ape men who existed at that time between 3 and 4 million years ago. They are called Australopithecus. But, foot bones of Australopithecus have been discovered at a place called Sterkfontein in South Africa. And, the foot of Australopithecus is not like that of a modern human being. It's more like the foot structure of a chimpanzee or a monkey with very long toes, kind of like human fingers, and a first toe that can move out to the side like a human thumb. Like you see, you can move your thumb at a 90-degree angle to the rest of your fingers. So that's what the Australopithecus foot is like. Actually, the only creature known to science that has a foot exactly like that of a modern human being is, in fact, human beings like us. So what did Mary Leakey actually find? I think she found evidence that humans like us were existing 3,700,000 years
Yes,
ago.
I agree.
So now some
Yes.
people might say, okay, you got footprints. Those are a little ambiguous. It would be better if you had complete human skeletons.
I
about
thought they have found bone fragments in strata. And have you ever talked to Dr. Robert Schoch about this? Would he be able to?
Well, I
help?
know Robert Schoch, and we've spoken at the same kinds of conferences. You know, sometimes he's there, I'm there. So I know Robert Schoch. I don't know that. I mean, like, alternative archaeology is a kind of a big field. Some people deal with, like myself, I deal with extreme human antiquity, kind of like the far end of the time spectrum, way back in time. And other people like Robert Schoch and Graham Hancock and others, they deal with the more recent end of the time spectrum, say the past 50,000 years or so. And they're kind of more interested in the history of civilization during that more recent period of time. So probably Robert Schoch is best known in alternative archaeology studies for his dating of the Sphinx and the pyramids in Egypt as being from the time period about 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, which he based on his studies of evidence for flowing water making channels.
Would you agree with his? Would you agree with his conclusions?
I do, and I think, you know. Then he's also become very much involved in studies of this site called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is about 13,000 years old. Because the basic thing he's dealing with is mainstream science wanted to put the Sphinx and things like that at about 5 or 6,000 years old, and he wanted to push them back to 11 or 12,000. And Göbekli Tepe is around 13,000, and it has kind of evidence. It's kind of like a Stonehenge in terms of they have like standing stones. Of course, they were buried under the ground, but standing stones with carved figures on them. And they were thinking Stonehenge is, again, it's maybe 7,000, 8,000 years old. And this is like 13,000 years old at Göbekli Tepe. So, you know, it's kind of, some people are working in alternative history or on that end of the spectrum, kind of pushing the origins of civilization back further and further into time. How far back they will eventually go in their work, I don't know, but I'm kind of dealing with things from the opposite end of the spectrum. So I don't know if he would agree with me about the kinds of things that I talk about, extreme human antiquity, but he's dealing with a different set of questions.
We have somebody with a question, I think, in here.
Sure.
Liz, do you want to ask your questions?
She asked us to ask it for because she's at a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
Does he think humans all came from the same?
I didn't catch that. You kind of broke up at the end.
One of the questions was about if you believe that humans have alien blood.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have to first ask the question, what is a human being? And I would say, many scientists today will say a human being is just a machine made of molecules. We're purely material beings. I don't accept that. I think we are beings composed of matter, mind, and consciousness. And for me, consciousness is something non-material. It's not something that's produced by chemicals in the brain. So I would say all of us, because we are beings of pure consciousness originally, we are all extraterrestrials. And we have, in our original identity, we don't have any kind of material body of any kind. But the conscious selves who come into the world of matter need vehicles made of matter in which to function on this level of reality. And so the human vehicle is one of them. And I believe there are hundreds of kinds of human vehicles for conscious selves existing on all different levels and all different planets in the cosmos. And I believe there have been interconnections between the different types of human-like beings that exist in the cosmos and these different human-like bodily vehicles. So, yeah, there have been some interbreeding, you could say, between humans, conscious selves, and human bodies, bodily vehicles on this planet, and human-like beings, conscious beings from other parts of the universe. Yeah. So, yeah, I think you could say
that was a great answer.
The conscious selves on this planet may have at some point interbred with the conscious selves in human-like forms from other planets or other dimensions even. Yeah. And yes, so my answer to the question, it's a complicated answer, but its simple answer is yes.
How many lives do you think you've had at this point?
Millions.
Great answer.
What? Millions?
Great answer. I agree. I agree completely.
The conscious self has no beginning and no end, and my connection, I think originally as a conscious self, I existed on some higher level of reality. But for some reason, by the decisions that I made as a conscious self, I've come in contact with the world of matter, where in order to function, I need a vehicle made of matter. So those vehicles are what we call bodies. And they can be human vehicles, plant vehicles, insect vehicles, fish vehicles, bird vehicles, dinosaur vehicles. They're just unlimited kinds of vehicles. And they're temporary. Like this vehicle I'm in now, it came into existence in 1948. You know, at some time in the not too distant future, this vehicle is going to stop. But as a conscious self, I'm eternal. So that means, okay, I get another vehicle that lasts 100 years, and then I get another one, and another one, and another one. Could be millions.
Do you get to move forward, though? Or do you have to be like a grasshopper again? Or do you get to be something more?
You can come to the level of what I call pure consciousness. And that's why I practice yoga and meditation, and I meditate on the Hare Krishna mantra and do other things with the idea of putting my consciousness in such a state that it doesn't have to enter into another vehicle made of matter that is temporary and subject to birth and death and all of that and karma. Yeah, it's possible
So
to
you're saying,
transcend. So I would say, yeah,
so you're hoping in this
I think I'm on.
lifetime that you've had, you think you're going to go above and beyond?
It's possible. If not, what I think is I'll take up where I left off in the next. Now, say if I've gotten 99% towards that goal, then I'll take it up in my next existence at 99% progress towards that goal, and I'll be given an opportunity to take the final step towards that. But yeah, ultimately that's what I'm looking to achieve in this life. We've kind of gone a little far from the stones and bones that we started talking about, but that's where these things inevitably lead, to these ultimate questions, which I'm very happy that you're asking, because as a conscious self, I'm kind of like, okay, I've got this temporary vehicle, human vehicle, and I'm going to use it to try to improve my consciousness, educate myself, qualify myself to graduate from this level of reality to the level of reality where no longer going to be identifying. It's just like a movie actor. You can have so many roles and you get so lost in the different roles that you play in so many different movies that you forget your real self, your real identity, apart from the roles that you play in the different movies, you could say. But
I was going to ask about your studies with the ancient Sanskrit texts and what evidence that you found there. Did you not, in the
Wolfman?
Pardon me?
Where's that question?
Oh, I was asking about the Vedic texts and have you read Sanskrit and studied any of that?
You don't have to study Sanskrit because the literatures are available in translation.
Oh, that's right.
But just for fun, like your previous caller was asking what I do for fun.
Well, I was more or less referring to some of the scripts that are hard to find. That they say there's all kinds of records that are still being uncovered, and
there are, like the Harappan script from the Harappan sites in northern India and Pakistan. There's this Harappan civilization that existed 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, and it has a script that is basically found on what they call cylinder seals that were carved in stone and used as seals to stamp clay, and they have different symbols, a collection of several hundred different kinds of symbols, which appear to be some kind of alphabet or writing that hasn't been deciphered. That's kind of an unsolved problem in Indian archaeology or South Asian archaeology, to kind of include the other countries that are part of that area. There's this Harappan script about 5,000 or 6,000
that's
years
like
old.
The language that Klaus Dona talks about, with like a different type of script that's all over the world, found everywhere, and nobody has been able to translate it.
Right. The Harappan script, which has, there are people who've compared it to the Easter Island script and other scripts around the world. but the Harappan that's found on the cylinder seals and impressions in clay from the Harappan sites in South Asia, India, basically, haven't been deciphered. I mean, people have proposed different ways of deciphering them, but none of them have kind of won widespread acceptance. So, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. I can read the Devanagari script in, that most of the Sanskrit literature is written in. I can read that script, but yeah, you're right. There are other scripts like the South Asian Harappan civilization script that haven't been deciphered. I think Klaus Dona, Graham Hancock, and others have mentioned that.
Yes, it's. Have you ever met Klaus Dona or have seen his artifacts?
Yes. Klaus, some years ago, he put on an exhibition in Vienna where he brought anomalous artifacts from private collections and museums all around the world to Vienna, where he had an exhibition that was I was there in connection with the opening of his exhibition. He had a conference where he invited alternative archaeology researchers from around the world, including myself and many of the others who you've named here on the show. And, so that was very nice. Klaus hosted a very well-organized conference, and, his exhibition was kind of really astonishing, that he was able to get all these artifacts from, as I said, private collections around the world and put on this.
Do you think that they were authentic? Did you, when you examined them, did you get to grab them, touch them?
Yeah, like for example, they had, from America, they had some of the human footprints that are found alongside dinosaur footprints. They were brought there and exhibited. They had some of the Ica stones from South America. They had some, he had all kinds of things like that. That he had brought together. Of course, then he's gone on to conduct his own excavations and investigations in different places. The last I heard, he was in the Philippines doing some work there. So, Klaus Dona is, I think, he's... I like his work. And who else did you mention?
Michael Tellinger.
Michael Tellinger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Michael. He invited me to come and speak about 2 years ago at a conference he organized in South Africa. He called it Ubuntu.
Yeah, I love his work he's doing there. It's amazing.
And his wife is also fantastic.
Some of his research supports yours as well. That's why I mentioned him.
Yeah, he's kind of investigated ancient stone circles and things, megalithic structures in South Africa. So, we had, he was, he hosted me there, so that was really good to meet him and the other researchers who came to his conference. And it was, like I said, held in South Africa, which was, I've been to South Africa.
We are running out of time.
Well, I'd just like to, that any of your listeners who, like in May, I'm speaking at a conference called Earth Origins in Sedona, Arizona. If people go to the schedule link on my website, mcremo.com, they can find out about that event. They'll have an opportunity to get a little discount, early bird discount on that conference.
And I'll put a link in my website.
Yeah, that's